What are some of the things that you kind of like learned in prison for the first 5 years, at least?
Right. Well, I said communication stuff. I learned how to talk to diverse groups of people. Um, Learn how to be resourceful, right? How to really think outside the box. I think is kind of a staple of being in prison. Um, just always trying to figure out a way to, achieve what you want, right? And not in a materialistic sense or like a conniving sense, but it's a place of a lot of restrictions. And so, to what degree can you operate outside of those restrictions, right? And they took the weights away from us in prison, so folks couldn't lift weights anymore. And then people would roll up their mattress, right, and tie it together, and then that creates kind of a dumbbell, right, or a barbell. And you could put your legal work or other paperwork inside of there, and it makes it heavier. Or you could fill a bag with a bunch of water, and water weighs a whole lot when you start adding it up, right? And so I mean, not always like just malicious stuff, but just to get by. Like I want to work out, and they took away this way I have of working out. So how can I create, some form of that for myself? So I think just that thinking in general, right? The food is horrible. How can I make horrible food taste a little bit better, right? Um, so I think that has a lot of applications to it, but just to kind of be able to be critical and creative at the same time. That environment sort of inspires that, right? There's tons of creative and artistic people in prison, and guys were making TV stands out of cardboard and wax, and just again, that kind of thinking out of the box, right? And you wonder sometimes, who's the first person to do that, right? So that was one of the big things, I think.
So like kind of on the same note, what kind of surprised you about prison? Like what happened that what are some things that you just didn't expect going into the experience?
Well, I knew people that had been in prison before, so there wasn't a whole ton of stuff that was completely foreign to me. But hearing about something and living through it are really two different things. I was surprised, honestly, at the lack of violent conflict. I thought that there would be more. And I was on high security yards, right? And so again, it wasn't that violence was unheard of, but I expected there to be a lot more violence than what there was. So that was surprising to me.
Did they also like categorize you based on your sentence, or like what kind of crime that you were in for?
Yeah, to some degree. So they have this whole classification algorithm that incorporates some kind of demographic factors, right? Are you married? Do you have kids? Did you graduate from high school? Where did you live? And then what's the nature of your offense? And have you been arrested before? What does your criminal history look like? So it's, they have this long, and they've changed it over time, so it's a little bit different now than it used to be. But yeah, it's a whole, classification scheme. And then your behavior in prison influences that, right? If you get in trouble, then you could get written up, and that could add a certain amount of points. If you stay good for X amount of time, then they'll take off a certain amount of points, and then your point level is what determines the security level, if you will, of the institution that you go to.
And were you kind of good? Did you, like, how was that? Did you get any, like, scuffles or anything, or were you just trying to, like, stay out of that?
No, I got in trouble in every prison I was at. I started out, so there's 4 levels, level 1 being the lowest, level 4 being the highest. So I started out as a level 3, and then I went to a level 4, and then I got validated.
So the validating thing, was that just like, that was like gonna happen, like by the courts to like going through your case, or?
No, so that validation doesn't have anything to do with what you went to prison for. It's supposed to be based entirely on in prison activity. Um, and so, and I had never been in prison before, right? And so it was based on just theoretically my actions in prison.
So technically, like just being in prison and like getting involved with like situations or something, that kind of like just led to it.
Yeah, but more so it was just people talking. There's plenty of people that get into a lot more conflicts and have a lot more write-ups than I ever did who don't get validated. And then there's people that probably had less write-ups than I did that do get validated. It's really up to the purview of the administration. Within the northern Mexican label and the southern Mexican label, they can pretty much validate whoever they want if they put their mind to it. And there's no accountability. So they said that these unnamed people said stuff about me, but I don't even know who they're talking about, let alone why that would be said, right? And so there's no check and balance in there. They come and tell you X amount of people have said that you're a part of this, therefore you're getting validated. And sometimes it's based on other things, right? We searched your cell and we found this thing and we think this thing is linked to this gang, therefore that's an element in that, is leaning us towards validating you. But let's see if we can collect more, right? And so people have been validated for pictures that they have in their cell. People have been validated in large part based on who they write to on the streets. People have been validated over birthday cards because they got a birthday card in a different prison 5 years ago, and the person who signed that birthday card has since been validated. They don't know because they're not in the same prison anymore. Then prison officials find that card in your room, and they say, oh, well, Joe signed this card. Joe is now a validated gang member. That makes you an associate of a validated gang member because he signed your card. Even though 5 years prior, he was not a validated gang member and you guys were in a general population together. And the guy may have only signed the card because it got passed around to him. And they're like, oh, it's my friend's birthday, sign a card. Okay, cool. What's the harm in signing a card, right? And so the harm in signing a card is you could be in solitary confinement for the rest of your life, right? And so, and you can't dispute that stuff. I mean, you could try, right? I fought my validation. I beat the Attorney General's office twice on my own with no legal help. But I still never got out of the SHU program until I paroled. They changed the goalposts, right? I got them to throw out certain information. Then they said, okay, that's fine because we have more. Well, then, okay. And then they said, well, we're going to investigate you. But while I'm investigated, I still have to stay in the same place that I had to stay in when they said I was already validated. So it's very much a kangaroo court, that process is. Because it's outside of the view of criminal courts. Prisons are given great deference by the court system to operate in the way that they see fit. The courts have said repeatedly, we don't know how to run a prison, so we defer to prison administrators to run a prison however they feel they need to. Unless you can point to a really clear constitutional violation, you can't necessarily challenge how a prison is run or how you're treated in a prison. And what constitutes, what rises to the level of a constitutional violation is, I think a lot of people would say it's fairly distorted, right? And it depends in part on the judge. It depends on a lot of things.
So again, like a lot is out of your control, basically. It's
right.
Up to the prison administration to make the rules and make decisions. And
right.
That's crazy. So while you were in, like, for the first 5 years, were you able to, like, contact your family?
Yes, my mom came to see me a lot, actually. She probably visited, well, she did visit me the most. I had a girlfriend when I went to prison. She stuck around for a couple years. My sisters would come and see me, right? But especially for the age group that I was in, people are getting older, right? And so there's a lot of people that are 25 that don't necessarily hang out with the same people they did at 18 or 19. Even just in society where you have tons of easy communication tools, right? Let alone when I'm sitting in some prison somewhere. And so my sister stayed in touch. My mom stayed in touch. Other people kind of came and went. I'd have some pen pals. I'd write, and some would write for a year or two. Some would write only once or twice, and kind of take it as it comes.
And then for the next 5 years, you were in solitary confinement.
Right.
Now that, I've seen a few videos on the internet, and that just seems crazy. Like sensory deprivation, as you're saying earlier. What was that like? What were you expecting before going into it, and what was the reality of the situation?
So Pelican Bay in particular, there's a lot of stories about it, right, that are told kind of just within the prison, and you don't get to read your mail. It's put on some screen outside your cell, and that's how you read it, and they wheel the shower stall up to your cell door and all these other things, which is not true, right? What shocked me at first was how quiet it was. It's very, very quiet. And they're very small sections. And so, whereas in a general population building, you have well over 100 cells, right? Well, think about it. So like San Quentin has 5 tiers to a section, and each of those tiers has 50 cells. And then in the more modern prison setups, there's 2 tiers, and each tier, gosh, I don't even remember now. Each tier has 30 or 40 cells, right? I feel like more, but we'll say 30 or 40 cells, and almost always all those cells are doubled up, right? In Pelican Bay, this section only has 8 cells, 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom. Most of those cells only have 1 person in it. And when you look out of your cell door, all you see is a wall. So there's just a wall in front of you. You're not facing any large open area. You're not facing any other cells. The idea is just to reduce as much contact as possible. There's a shower at the end of each tier, which is basically a cell that is just set up as a shower. And so you come out of your cell at shower time, you go down to the front to get a razor if you want one. And then you lock yourself in a cell, you take your shower, they unlock it, you give them back the razor, you go back to your cell. When it's time to go to the yard is just